Everybody, and welcome to this episode 114 of the Thoughtium Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I am your host, Anthony Ewing, CEO and founder here at Thoughtium, and we are thrilled to bring you new leaders every Thursday at 3 o'clock live. We want to welcome our communities, those that live on LinkedIn, those that join us on Facebook or YouTube, and more importantly, those friends, family, colleagues, clients that tune in on a week-to-week basis. We want to welcome you all. We do not take for granted the fact that we get to connect with you all on a week-to-week basis and bring you such incredible leaders. And today is no exception. This is the 114th episode of Navigating Now. We have covered such a range of topics over the years. And one of those topics that we love talking about most is the evolving commercial engine within organizations. And a big part of that is how marketing has played such an integral role in, pivoting in real time for so many organizations over the last few years, and also expanding value for so many organizations that are really trying to thrive in this time. So today we have a wonderful guest in Judy Franks. Judy comes to us from here in Chicago. She is the president and founder of the Marketing Democracy. She's also an assistant professor at Northwestern University. And Judy has absolutely done it all, from big agency life to academia, to really now focused on starting a platform that democratizes those marketing principles that really matter most. And I'm excited to bring Judy to the table today to talk about the evergreen nature of marketing. And with that, we will bring Judy in. Welcome to the table, Judy. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, Anthony.
Yes. Now, this is your second time on the show, so we love return guests. And you were brought to us by one of our very own, Michelle Thomas. She just adores you and your work. And we've gotten to know you and your work, and more specifically, this platform and the marketing democracy that you are building and growing. But for those of you who maybe don't know who you are, or who haven't tuned in previous episodes, would love for you to tell folks a little bit about you and particularly your career path.
Sure. Well, it's actually a wonderful career path to share with everyone. So I grew up madly in love with media. So the big joke in our household growing up in Metro Detroit, back when there were physical newspapers showing up on everyone's door, my dad would grab the sports section of the Detroit News, and I would ask him for the part of the paper that published the Nielsen ratings. So I was this strange little kid who always loved media and was fascinated by this idea that media enterprises would put content out there that would engage us and attract our attention. So I've made a career of that. I studied telecommunications at Michigan State University a million years ago, and had the good fortune to be recruited by Leo Burnett. I'm Midwestern at my core, and so I packed up my bags from Detroit and moved to Chicago and never looked back. So I started my career at Leo working on Procter & Gamble. I was actually the first generation of media management professionals at Leo. It was really interesting. Back in the day, media was a training ground for other facets of the agency, but even, rewinding back to 1985, media was starting to get complex enough that Leo dedicated a management track for people to thrive in media. So I started my career at Leo. Spent a short while at Foot Cone and Belding, absolutely loved it. Then went to an agency formerly known as Tatham, Laird and Cudner. I got to work for the great Charlotte Beers. Again, on P&G, spent 12 years there. Then actually went back to my home, but my home had a new name at that point, Starcom Worldwide. So I was a senior vice president and media director at Starcom, and that's where I met the great Michelle. And then in the 20-year mark of my career, I started getting antsy and wanted to do something a little bit different. So I actually left Starcom and went to Energy BBDO here in Chicago as an executive vice president and director of brand behavior. And my role there, it was really the precursor to comms planning, this idea of how do we take creative ideas and grab a hold of them before they become trapped as television commercials? How do we think about them in a channel neutral light? As part of my tenure at Energy BBDO, I was blessed with serendipity and was assigned to the Wrigley Global Marketing College. And I got to spend 3 years traveling around the world advocating for the intersection of channel and creativity. And throughout that process, I discovered that I fell in love with teaching. So when the world kind of fell apart at the end of 2008, I always tell my students that my pink slip was pink, like everyone else's. I zagged and had the good fortune to land at Northwestern University. And 14 years later, here I am as an assistant professor in the Integrated Marketing Communications program. Alongside that, though, I launched a consultancy that I'd named the Marketing Democracy, and it was all about the intersection, again, of channel and content and really democratizing the marketing process. And post-pandemic, and I think it's a story unto itself, but post-pandemic, I decided that the marketing democracy needed to change, and here we are today.
That's wonderful. I mean, such a storied, resume for somebody who has played almost all of the roles, in and out of agency. And as someone myself now running a small business, coming from a large corporation, a large commercial organization, I wouldn't trade that experience for the world.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't call it a prerequisite, but those days working in big agency life, big organization life, that is where you truly understand how to navigate, how to communicate, how to collaborate.
Right.
But as your career kind of progressed, you maybe your sphere of creation maybe has gotten a little bit more narrow, and like you've really focused in on really democratizing the key marketing principles. And that's where we stand today is, and I love the title of this episode, Your Marketing Plan, Fad, Mainstream, or Evergreen. So to tee this up, I have a couple of questions. You talked in your intro about kind of the nostalgia of growing up and looking forward to the Nielsen ratings. I'm curious, Judy, what other maybe marketing channel or platform or even asset do you think back and remember growing up that you're very, very nostalgic about today? And does it exist in today's world?
Great question. And at school here, we talk about media generations. Every single one of us, we are all byproducts of the state of the media as it existed in our teenage years. So this idea of digital natives versus digital immigrants is a false narrative, because every single one of us, in fact, if you look at teenagers today, the difference between today's teen who's hanging out on TikTok versus a teen who's just 5 years older than them who lived on Snapchat, let alone Insta and Facebook. I would say my nostalgic attachment, in fact, my students tease me, I'm television. I grew up on television. I, grew up on the Brady Bunch, for Pete's sakes, and this idea of the connectedness of television. And I still think in today's highly addressable world, there's something about gathering with friends and family, even if we're far apart and we're using separate screens to do it. But this connectedness and this cultural sphere, if you will, that we get from television. So yeah, I'm a big TV fan. And I love thinking about how television has evolved and how really businesses of any size now have an opportunity to play in that sandbox.
Yeah, I'll join you in that nostalgia. Television, when commercials were either an opportunity to go get something to eat or drink, or you just watched the commercials because you would miss the rest of the program.
Right.
And I'd also say television events. So, I know today we still are able to enjoy live events, mainly sporting events, live, where you kind of have to, you
Right.
get that opportunity to huddle around a TV with your friends and family, the World Cup being a perfect example of that.
Absolutely.
But I think back to a day when you couldn't see Michael Jackson's music video for the first time without watching it live on TV at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday. And your brothers and sisters made sure that they were downstairs glued to the TV to watch his music video, and so many other events that kind of came through that live venue. I'd argue that today, and I love your point about how the distribution maybe has changed, but the behavior and the content has not. We very much consume social media today, like we did some of the older medium in the past. And I think making those connections helps us understand and even adopt today's platforms a lot more fluently. Correct?
Absolutely. In fact, Anthony, the interesting thing for me is in today's digital marketing era, um, I think we become hyper obsessed with this idea of addressability. The fact that,
Mm.
we can do a much better job of identifying and defining individual consumer audiences and then sending messages directly to them.
Mm.
And I'm a little concerned by that because I think each of us exists in three dimensions. Sure, we're individuals with specific wants and needs, and we want to make sure that marketers treat us like the most valuable customer that they have. So I get that. But so much of our life we spend in our communities. And when we think about marketing and media, when you think about brands as cultural artifacts, or you think about
Mm.
the way we consume media, so much of it is a form of social glue, if you will. And then when we think about how we exist in culture and how there's kind of this reciprocal thing going on. So, on the one hand, we draw from pop culture like the World Cup or Prince Harry and Meghan's, big
Mhm.
episodes going to be launching tonight on Netflix. And, many of us are going to go run and watch it, right? But culture, not only do we draw culture from media, but we also, and our behavior fuels culture. So, this idea that even though the digital media world has enabled us to be much more personal, I think it's important for us as marketers to remember that it's all of the above. It's
Mm.
personal, it's community, and it's culture.
Interesting. So would you say, and I'll go back to the title of this episode, fad, mainstream, or evergreen, would you say that some of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing you say is some of that like hyper segmentation might be a bit of a fad in today's marketing world?
I think so.
Yeah,
I
agreed.
I advocate for all of the above. The
Yep.
interesting thing is when I think across my career, you used to have, well, you still do, you had direct marketing, advertising, and PR, and they all had their swim lanes. And because they all had their swim lanes, they all collaborated and played nicely together. And we knew that PR was, as broad as you could get, was wonderful. And then advertising played in this media sandbox that, we use demographic audience targeting to deliver that media. And then direct marketing was always trying
Mhm.
to establish these deep one on one connections with customers. So to me, I question, why are we battling with this now?
Mm.
We need all three. And so I would say one of the fads that we're dealing with in today's marketing era is being forced to choose.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, what's the most effective? What's going to get me the most immediate ROI? What's the most
Mhm.
efficient? And I would argue that um, strategically leveraging all of your assets as opposed to creating winners and losers is
Mm.
a really important lesson. So I would say one of the fads we're dealing with is this idea of chasing the right answer.
Yeah.
And
I couldn't agree more. And for all of those, small business owners that are tuning in, what wonderful advice, especially for those of us who are maybe building a marketing plan for the first time, or even developing a unique brand in the first year or two of your business. I think that takes us to mainstream. And one of the topics that I'd love to discuss with you, Judy, is I think one of the most positive byproducts of the evolution of marketing over the years is how available and accessible and feasible marketing becomes, especially for us small business owners in today's world. And I think Thought Team is a perfect example of, we're a small team here in Chicago, and the tools, the channels, and the assets that we're able to develop with just consumer grade platforms, like Canva and like Restream that we're using right now to go live to our channels, were not available even 5 to 7 years ago. And I'm curious as to that's something that we're so grateful for, not just because we can do it on a bare bones budget, but way more so the fact that it really allows us to tell our story in perpetuity, without having to necessarily, subscribe to or invest in leveraging an outside agency. So I'm curious, mainstream, has marketing gone mainstream, and maybe what are the pros and cons of that?
So, yes and no. What do I mean by that? One of the biggest lessons that I think any business owner of any size needs to really take to heart is the idea that marketing is strategy. Marketing is not tactically, throwing something up on Instagram and then waiting to see how many likes you got. Um, and so, on one hand, access has become so much more open and the opportunities are endless. On the other hand, if you don't have a marketing strategy, you're going to get lost. And I sense and that's partly why I launched the Marketing Democracy, small business owners are very entrepreneurial by nature. So they like to figure it out and do it themselves. And I wanted to give them the tools to figure it out and do it themselves. But you still need a game plan before you go in and start shooting from the hip, if you will. So that's kind of the, double-edged sword that I'm seeing here.
And what are some of those tried and true principles that are really become the pillar of the marketing democracy that, let's say, small business owners can keep in mind? I love this idea that marketing is strategy. So yes, as small business owners, we are taught to uh, you know uh, just create and document and put it out there. But
Right.
when we do have the opportunity to stop and pause, and we should, and really put together that plan and that strategy, what are maybe one or two of the key principles that have just stood the test of time?
Absolutely. Um, and these principles actually led me to break down marketing into 5 easy steps. And
Mhm.
it starts with knowing your customers. And one of the fundamental principles, and that's why I'm teaching here at Northwestern University, we founded integrated marketing communication. And it was really a shift away from the manufacturer, their products, their services, their brands to the customer. You have to put your customer at the center of everything you say and do. You have to recognize that you are in business to solve their problems and make their lives better. They are not in the world to make your life better. It's the opposite. So, really taking that approach of being incredibly humble and recognizing that you play a very small role in their lives and you need
Mhm.
to understand them not as your customers, but as real people with big problems and a life that they have to lead. And you play a very small role in that. But boy, if you can make their lives better and you can do so seamlessly and efficiently, they will reward you with their loyalty, their customer lifetime value. So I would say that's the number one
Mm.
principle. The number two principle is you need to build your brand. And that's one of the benefits that I've had. I have been blessed to work for these amazing advertising agencies, and I've learned how to build brands. And it's a blueprint, it's an architecture, and It lives at the intersection of what your customers care about most and what you can deliver better than the alternatives in the marketplace. And then living that promise with everything that you say and do. I think there's a mistake out there that some people think that their brand is their name, their logo, and their tagline. And
Mm,
that's not it at all. So I would say this idea of first and foremost, taking a customer centric point of view. And then before you even begin marketing, to build your brand and understand who you are and what your promise is and your personality and how you should behave. Those two things have to happen before you even
mm.
begin the process of setting your strategy.
Tried and true principles, right? And those that
Absolutely.
maybe over the years with the proliferation of technology and maybe as what I had spoken to, just the ease of being able to kind of go to market with messaging through social media, we've maybe lost that sense of these tried and true principles. So, how have you found? Well, I guess two-part question. One, has it been difficult for you, Judy, over the course of the last decade to stick to these, five principles? Or maybe are they just so obvious and you continue to see people, faltering one way or the other that you're just every year able to double down on these five principles?
So the interesting thing, and I do this more with my students in the business world, I don't want anyone who goes to the marketingdemocracy.com to feel like they're back to school. So I've done all that work for them, right?
Right.
But the interesting thing is over time, if you look at best in class examples of marketing that works, and I do this with my students. So instead of having them build marketing plans, I do the opposite. I have them deconstruct award-winning
Mm,
business building cases, and over
mm,
again, despite how complex the marketing landscape has become or what media channels they use, it keeps on coming down to these core principles. So frankly, I think it's made them more profound and
mm.
easier to identify, because it's very easy to spot marketing that you can tell is just floundering and it's
Yeah.
out there from the hip again.
I love that. Just again, and maybe that helps us understand the evergreen nature of some of these just tried and true marketing principles. I love the idea as well of looking up and out and seeing what's worked, deconstructing that, and seeing at the core of that are just some of these real key pillars that we sometimes take our eye off of, like paying attention to your customer, like defining and building a brand. And so for those folks who maybe want to learn a little bit more, they can go to, and I correct me if I'm wrong, themarketingdemocracy.com.
Yes, www.themarketingdemocracy.com.
And I understand that that platform, as it evolves, is generating more and more content that's available in the public domain for people to consume, correct?
Absolutely. But the good news is the foundations of what you need are there. So I
Yeah.
spent 2 years building it because I wanted to make sure that when we opened the door, a small business owner could go directly to the free library, and whether they only had the appetite for sound bites, I call them, my little
Hmm.
fortune cookies, or if they wanted to download mini lesson guides, that so much of what they need is already there waiting for them.
Mm, I love that. Judy, thank you so much for your time. Before we go, are you up for a quick lightning round?
Of course.
Okay, wonderful. And we do this each week. This helps us get to know you a little bit better and maybe a little bit
Sure.
more about your work.
Sure.
Okay, so first question, Judy. What are you reading, listening to, or even geeking out about today?
Oh my gosh. Well, if you're asking me today,
Or even watching?
it's the winter meetings because I'm an obsessed baseball fan. So we need to back up on that.
Oh, cool.
Um, yes, yes. So I'm just waiting to see how my Chicago Cubs fare through
Cubs,
all of
good.
this.
Cool.
Um, I am geeking out and I love the podcasts from the work.
Mm,
Um, I also love Rashad Tabakawala, What Next?
mm.
So I tend to be podcasting more than reading because being a professor by day, I stare at a screen all day.
Love that. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. Which one is ahead in 5 years today?
Insta.
Ooh, so it makes a little bit of a comeback because I know it's been, it's been faltering the last 12 or so months, correct?
Well, I'm really interested in what they're doing in the content commerce space. So
Hmm.
that's why I'm pleased with them. I also think that they do not have quite the issues with brand safety that we're
Mm,
seeing. And then TikTok, I'm just concerned by what's going on in our geopolitical
yeah,
sphere to see what's going to happen with that.
yeah,
And I
absolutely.
would say that Facebook, as we talked about mainstream and we look at innovation curves, I would say that Facebook is definitely on the downward part
Yeah,
of that curve. Yeah.
I think Meta has some different plans above and beyond Facebook. That's a whole nother episode.
That's a whole nother episode.
um, Judy, if you had the opportunity to have 3 million, a 3 million person following on a social media platform of choice, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, or you had 45 seconds on a Super Bowl ad, which would you choose?
Neither.
Ooh, I like that answer. Tell me more.
Um, I don't need 3 million followers. I'd like a smaller community of engaged customers that I can truly make a difference with. And when I think about the small business community, I don't think I'm going to find them on a social media channel. They're very busy. They're not looking for me on social media. They're certainly not looking for me on the Super Bowl either. They're looking for me right here.
I love that. You take care of your community and you take care of what we call your 4 block radius. And you don't need 3 million followers to do that. I
You got it.
absolutely appreciate that. Last question for you, Judy.
Sure.
Think about something that you really admire about yourself and finish this sentence. If the
Okay.
world were a lot more like Judy Franks, it would be blank.
Unafraid to try new things.
Mm.
So when it comes to the world of media, in fact, my student, we joke around about this. Think about it. I'm a 59-year-old dinosaur teaching 20-year-olds how the media world works. And the reason why I can do that is because I'm a perpetual student. I'm more than willing to jump in and explore things and study them and try them and ask why. And I'm not afraid to make a mistake. You clean it up later and you move on.
I love that. And spoken from somebody with such experience, I take that advice a lot more deeply and a lot more personally than others. So I really, really appreciate you sharing that. And more importantly, I appreciate you sharing your voice and your leadership with our community here at Navigating Now. We so appreciate you. We appreciate your practitionership. We just love connecting with leaders like yourself that treat their work like an art form or a craft. And I really think you embody that ethos. So, Judy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Wonderful. We'll see you soon.
Take
All right. And again, we want to thank Judy Franks for joining us for the Navigating Now Roundtable series. We want to remind everybody that we are live every Thursday at 3 o'clock. You can view all previous episodes and also look forward to those that will be next by visiting www.thoughttium.com live. Thank you all so much for joining today, and we will see you all next week, Thursday. So long.